Yo, what is up guys, and welcome back to McAD's Entertainment. I'm your host as always, Adam McGahee. For anyone who's been following the channel for the past few months, you may have noticed our ongoing coverage of the new Marvel Zombies comic, which is called Marvel Zombies: Dawn of Decay, which is basically Last of Us meets Marvel. It's what it is. It's Last of Us. Now, I was covering things issue by issue, but now the whole thing is complete, so in typical McAD's fashion, I've edited it all into one giant movie for you guys to enjoy. Before we hop into that though, as always, I did just want to remind you guys that our superhero training program is live. Physical and mental health are huge for my family and I, so we've crafted our own superhero training program. I have my own app where I can provide one-on-one online training, which aims to help get you in superhero shape like your favorite heroes from DC and Marvel movies. Now, I am offering free consultations. If this is something you'd be interested in, you can check out the form in the description or the pinned comment below. With that out of the way though, let's get on with what you came here for, and that is the full gory story of the time the Last of Us virus came to the Marvel Universe. The story opens where we see Groot and Rocket Raccoon trapped inside some sort of futuristic prison. Planning their escape, Groot attempted to use his vines to pick the lock, only for the security system to activate, zapping the poor dude, sending him into the prison wall. Impatient at his friend for cutting the wrong wire, Rocket scolded Groot and told him to hurry up, where Groot, in his own Groot way, attempted to apologize, but apparently had a cold and was profusely sniffing out some sort of mysterious green slime. Demanding for Groot to hurry up before their jerk jailers arrived, we see just who these jerks were, as it were none other than the Avengers, where Captain America questioned the pair on just exactly why they had recently broken into a high-security lab. Rocket then informed the heroes that he had received intel of General Ross stashing a secret weapon titled Project Terror Laser, which he planned to safely obtain and keep locked away so bad guys could not use it for, terror and stuff. I absolutely believe him. Let the cute raccoon man go, guys. General Ross then politely corrected the Guardians and told them that this was not Project Terror Laser, rather it was Project Terror War, the alternate name being Earth Soil. So instead of a cool death laser, it was actually a prototype laser that modified seeds to grow in harsh climates. Ew, a laser that actually helps the environment by making food and not blowing stuff up? Gross. Count me out. Rocket then shared my disappointment by also thinking this was lame, arguing that the project should have been more properly named to something like Farm Laser, which Hulk found absolutely hilarious, to the point where it made him turn back to normal. General Ross then reminded the team that the Guardians were an extension of the Avengers, and he would let this incident slide this time, and had them vow to not have something like this ever happen again. As the group made their way outside the facility, we see that Groot's sniffles from before were a result of a cold that he had caught after petting a Flurkin cat on Sakaar that seemed to be infected with some sort of disease. Thor then comforted the tree man by telling him that even the greatest warriors make mistakes, where Cap interrupted the two to pull Groot aside. Steve then told Groot how valuable he saw him as a fellow Avenger, but then broke out some of the most heartbreaking words that you never want to hear Captain America say, where he told him that he was disappointed in him given his latest behavior. With Groot being absolutely broken by this, Steve then told him that he'd expect this much from Rocket, but he held Groot to a much higher standard. He knew this was wrong, but proceeded in trying to steal this laser anyway. As Groot profusely apologized, Cap dropped the iconic "I'm not mad, just disappointed" line and walked off as Groot cried in the background. Man, I didn't even steal this laser, and Cap got me feeling bad just reading this. Making their way outside, the heroes would then come across a giant-sized Ant-Man playing with the Quinjet, where Iron Man asked him if he could just borrow some PIM particles to implement into his armor, where the man said that this was absolutely not happening. Making their way inside the ship, we would see the saddened Groot still thinking on Cap's words from before. Not letting this go, he would tap Steve on the shoulder where he'd attempt to explain himself and apologize once more, only for his cold to get the best of him, where he straight up sneezed green tree snot right into Cap's face. Taking two major Captain America L's in the same story, Groot, feeling absolutely horrible for doing this to his icon, went to sit down. He was then comforted by Rocket, who told him not to feel too bad about it. However, we would see that things were about to get much worse, as Captain America suddenly fell to his knees, feeling that something was wrong with his head. Steve would then say that his mind would feel like it was on fire, where Black Widow would go to help him, only to see that some sort of fungal infection completely took over the man's face, as he transformed into some sort of monstrous zombified plant creature. Having no time to react, Natasha was powerless against Steve, who immediately infected her as well. With Tony and Scott wondering just what was going on, Stark also was too late, as the now infected Nat caught him with his helmet off and began to feed upon him. Seeing what became of his friends, Thor told the monsters to stand down, where they would close in upon him. Leaving him with no choice, Odinson would then whip his hammer at the infected heroes, where we would see they had much faster reflexes than the traditional zombie, as they dodged the attack, causing the weapon to come smashing into the ship's control panel. Calling his Mjolnir back, we'd see just how fast these zombies were, as Captain America would pounce upon the Thunder God and infect him just before he could retrieve his weapon. Wasting no time whatsoever, Rocket loaded up his gun and prepared to ice his former buddies, where Bruce, knowing they could be saved, kicked Rocket aside as he fired, blowing a hole in the side of the ship, where the poor guy was sucked outside, but was luckily saved by a quick-acting Groot. With now all the major Avengers infected with this new virus, they closed upon Banner, who tried to reason with them, as he did not want the Hulk to come out and cause any damage to them. As expected though, these quick-evolving plant-zombie hybrids were not listening to reason, but before they could feed, the ship quickly lost control as it plummeted to the ground. During the commotion, Banner would be tossed to the ceiling where he'd smack his head and go unconscious, while Groot sadly lost hold of Rocket as he was sent hurtling to the earth below. Wishing to save his friends, Groot had to make a choice, where he saw the passed out Banner being eyed upon by the hungry horde. Immediately springing into action, Groot leapt upon Bruce, forming a barrier around him with his own body, a barrier that was immune to the bites and scrapes of the unrelenting attackers. Fighting the group off, Groot grabbed the unconscious Banner, where he leapt out of the Quinjet and came crashing down upon a nearby rooftop, where he watched the ship plummet down as it exploded into a massive ball of flame. Hours later, Bruce would awaken, where Groot would show him just how bad things had gotten. In the streets below, we would see the sky burn red, where countless residents had now been infected by this virus, thus resulting in a citywide outbreak. Questioning just who could have done this, things then cut to the zombified Avengers, who were still very much alive after the crash, brutally attacking and feeding upon anyone who opposed them. Wondering just what to do, Banner immediately went into scientist mode as he thought of a solution to things. He then figured that since this virus transmitted through bites, meant that the virus incubated in mucous membranes, and therefore deduced that all this started after Groot sneezed on Cap, where Groot was very disheartened to hear that all of this was kind of his fault. Man, Groot, from disappointing Captain America of all people to starting a zombie apocalypse, this is just This is not your day, man." Rightfully covering his face if Groot were to sneeze again, Banner told the plant man that since he was patient 0 and asymptomatic of the virus, he could take his mucus and engineer it into a potential antidote. However, he would need material from a high-tech lab, something that only Avengers Tower would have. And given that this was a zombie story, the tower, of course, was far away. Bruce then revealed that while in his human form he was susceptible to illness, but in his Hulk form he most likely would be immune. But the caveat to that would be, he'd kind of be the Hulk who, liked to smash things, and did not want to run the risk of killing any innocent infected in his path. Knowing that his mind was the only choice they had at a cure, Banner opted to transform, but it would be entirely up to Groot to guide Hulk to Avengers Tower and not let him harm anyone along the way. A job Groot was hesitant to accept, but ultimately was forced to, given the severity of this situation. Bruce then enacted his transformation with the best trick he knew, and that would be through pain. He then used a brick to crush his hand, where he then became the Incredible Hulk once more, with a very concerned and overwhelmed Groot looking on behind him. The next issue opens where we see Groot and a freshly transformed Hulk looking over Avengers Tower. Desperately trying to convince the Green Giant they needed to go there so Bruce could make a cure for the zombie virus plaguing the city, Hulk, not exactly versed in Grootese, didn't really know what he was trying to tell him, and from what he could decipher, then told him that Avengers Tower was rather boring, for all they did there was talk and make silly costumes for each other. Telling Groot he found him boring and Rocket way more entertaining, Hulk then leapt to the streets below, where he was enlightened to see just how bad things were, as the pair were immediately noticed by countless New York residents who were infected with the fungal zombie virus. As the monsters lunged at the hero, luckily his impenetrable skin kept him unharmed, where he asked the humans just why they were trying to bite him. Rather annoyed at the king-size mosquitoes trying to get a nibble, Hulk began to attack, telling them to back off and leave him alone, all while a mysterious individual watched on from the shadows. As the creatures continued to close in, Hulk quickly became more and more frustrated, threatening to tear the zombies' heads off, where Groot, still adhering to Bruce's promise from before, kept these infected people safe by using his abilities to create a tree bark barrier in front of the zombies, shielding them from the Hulk's punches. This only frustrated the dude even further, who hated on poor Groot for ruining his fun, telling him his name should be I Am Jerk instead. Still dealing with his cold that kind of started this whole infection, along with more swarms of approaching zombies, Groot quickly realized they were near Central Park, where he successfully managed to communicate with Hulk that there were less people in there, which he for once agreed was a good idea, and opted to venture. As the pair journeyed towards their destination, they once again were watched on from the distance by this strange long-haired individual. The blanket of nightfall would soon descend upon our heroes as they made their way through Central Park, where Hulk, feeling humorous today, would torture poor Groot with knock-knock jokes, where the tree man luckily was able to knock off the knock-knocks by showing Hulk they were near their destination, where the man once again refused, saying that Avengers Tower was for boring nerds. Before they could continue their conversation, Hulk was out of nowhere attacked by the mystery man who was watching from before, who he'd come to realize was the infected Thor, who somehow, despite being a zombie, was able to still wield the power of his hammer Mjolnir. Thinking this was a great literal knock-knock joke, Hulk would not be laughing for too long as the Thunder God then hurled his hammer at the beast, sending him flying directly into Avengers Tower, which Groot adorably cheered on as the best happy accident all day, as this was exactly where he needed Hulk to be. Royally ticked off, Hulk leapt back out of the tower to combat Thor, where we discovered that the man was still somewhat conscious and aware of what was going on, as a series of vein-like roots would spread over his arm, where he yelled at the pair to run, only for a mere seconds later, the infection would take control of his mind once more, where he'd pounce upon Groot, biting his arm completely off. Before the zombie god of thunder could enjoy a nice vegan flesh meal, he was promptly stomped by the Hulk, where the pair would engage in combat, giving Groot just enough time to grow his arm back. As Thor ferociously bit all over Hulk, our big green Avenger thankfully remained uninfected, still questioning just why everyone was wanting to bite him today, and reinforced that he indeed was not food. Tossing Odinson off of him, we'd see Thor regain a form of consciousness once more as he looked upon Groot, telling him that he could not control this plague that was inside of him. He then reveals that it was Mjolnir that was keeping him somewhat still alive, but now even its power was not enough, as it was just barely slowing his infection down. Tempted by the virus's hold over him to just completely bash the helpless Groot's head in, Thor fought back, telling himself that he could not harm his friend. With Groot hearing Hulk make his way back into the fray, he wanted to keep poor Thor safe from getting pummeled to death by the beast, where he then made an executive order to toss Thor Super Mario 64 Bowser style into the air away from the park. Thinking he did a job well done at keeping his friend alive, Groot's day immediately got worse as we see Hulk bound into the air and grab Thor, vowing that he was not losing this fight. Despite this virus plaguing his body, Thor's Asgardian pride still remained intact, for he also did not plan on losing, as he shocked Hulk with a powerful bolt of lightning, sending him to the earth. Realizing this was an attempted death blow, Hulk, seeing that Thor was no longer holding back, was delighted to take his kid gloves off as well, where he ripped off a nearby street post, turning it into a makeshift spear, which he planned to use to pierce the prince right through the heart. Thor would immediately again toss his hammer at Hulk, and it would land right near the horrified Groot's feet, where he'd witness Hulk leap into the skies once more, with his weapon aimed at the Avenger, ready to end things once and for all. Not about to let these two kill each other, the quick-thinking living tree would then use his powers to grab a nearby tank and wrap it around the hammer, where Thor would call it back, only to be rather shocked at all this extra weight coming back with it, where it would come smacking directly into him, but also acted as an instant shield, keeping him safe from the Hulk's assault. Mjolnir would then fly completely past its master's hands, through the waters of New York Harbor, and stop dead in its tracks, where it would crash into the Statue of Liberty. No longer having his hammer to keep the infection at bay, we'd see Thor rapidly begin to transform before our very eyes. He'd try to call it back, but since he was now fully infected, he'd be deemed no longer worthy, as we'd see the hammer sink to the riverbed. Hulk would then ask Groot if he went and killed the space hippie, where he of course said no, only for the brute to gladly agree to finish the job, where he once again grabbed his spear. Having enough violence for one day, Groot immediately sprang into action, enveloping his vines around Hulk, which he then used to choke the guy out, knocking him unconscious, thus resulting in him turning back into Bruce Banner. Grabbing the unconscious doctor, Groot made his way out of Central Park and closer to Avengers Tower, where something would catch his attention. A voice, a child's voice, coming from the stairs leading down to the subway. Sounding like a child pleading for their mother, Groot ventured down into the darkness below to investigate just who or what this could be. The next issue picks up right where the previous left off, as we see Groot carrying the unconscious body of Bruce Banner as he journeyed down the New York subway. All to locate the mysterious child he kept hearing cry out for its mother. Approaching closer and closer towards the voice, Groot soon came across an abandoned stroller and what appeared to be a baby lying on the darkened train tracks. Going to help the tiny human, our hero would discover that this was no infant. It in fact wasn't even a child at all. It was merely a toy, playing the phrase over and over again, begging for its mother's help. I'm not really up to date on baby doll lore, but who programs a toy with a catchphrase like this? It's weird and creepy, man. The Guardian of the Galaxy would soon realize that creepy baby dolls were the least of his troubles, where he soon heard the sound of rustling metal quickly approaching him. This was the sound of a flaming subway car filled with countless zombies who came hurtling in his direction. Narrowly evading getting turned into a nice jar of Vegemite, Groot witnessed the train smash into the wall, violently tossing the zombies out. The resilient infected would soon get back to their feet and make their way towards the unconscious Banner, where Groot shielded the man with his body. Seeing he was vastly outnumbered, the Tree Man took a page from Batman's book and used his arm as a grappling hook-like device, where he pulled he and Bruce up to the pipe system, only for one of the pipes to snap, where Groot could only watch in horror as Banner came crashing upon the floor. Absolutely not caring about the 5-second rule, the zombies went to turn Banner into lunch, where quick-acting Groot decided to take a drastic measure and slap the man right in the face, causing him to immediately Hulk out, demanding to know who hit him. Yeah, just a reminder, never do the sleeping pie face prank on Bruce Banner, boys. It's never gonna work out. Believing it to be the zombies who did this, Hulk cornered the creatures, ready to bash their heads in, where Groot tried to get him to calm down and not hurt anyone, for if Banner's calculations were correct, these people could still be saved once he made his cure. While Banner's genius helped him understand Groot's language, Hulk was not exactly taking Grootese lessons on Duolingo, and was continuously annoyed that all the man could say was, "I am Groot." Seeing this as an opportunity, Groot leapt upon Hulk, repeating his catchphrase over and over, which played right into his hands as the brute threw him off and chased after him, leaving the undead safe. At least, for now. As Groot dashed up the subway steps, he was soon caught by Hulk, who vowed he would make him sorry for getting on his nerves, where he then felt an enormous boot come crashing down upon him. While we'd be right to assume this was Bigger Boot from the SpongeBob movie, this was somehow even worse, as we realized this boot belonged to a giant zombified Ant-Man who immediately snatched up Groot and tossed him into his mouth, devouring him whole. Offended that someone bigger than him thought he was stronger than him, Hulk leapt to the skies, where he punched the infected Scott right in the face, sending him into a nearby building. As the man lay unconscious, we would see a series of wooden tendrils surround his teeth, where emerged our hero Groot, who we see was still very much alive, and conveniently right near Avengers Tower, the destination he'd been trying to get to after all this time. Telling Hulk to come along with him, the monster argued back, saying he wasn't some beta male simp and still wished to fight. Picking up a tank, he then tossed it at the zombie Ant-Man, who deflected the vehicle like a literal toy, right back at the pair, causing it to explode. Not taking this line down, Hulk liked Groot's idea of doing harm to the zombies on the inside, where he then pounced upon Scott's chest and attempted to pry his mouth open so he could pulverize the fleshy organs within. Horrified at the thought of Ant-Man's guts getting literally rearranged, Groot thought back to Captain America's words from earlier in this tale, where he instructed him that he needed to step it up and do what heroes do. Inspired by these words, Groot was struck with genius once more, where he spotted a nearby manhole cover. Channeling his inner Cap, Groot then tossed his makeshift shield at Scott's belt, which activated the Pym particles, causing him to shrink down to a cute, bite-sized zombie, which he placed into a nearby Avengers toy set from an abandoned street vendor. Is he chokeslamming a Lego Hulk? I kinda love this story now. As Hulk was wondering where his big red zombie man went, the quick-thinking Groot once again came to the rescue, where he grabbed a Rocket Raccoon toy from the vendor's shop and played its catchphrase to Hulk, who found him absolutely hilarious once again. So hilarious that he turned back to normal. With Banner back in control, he was overjoyed that Groot was successful in his mission to get him to the tower. All they needed to do next was get inside to his lab so they could make his antidote. In an unforeseen turn of events, Groot would lose control as we see he was still battling with his cold and would sneeze right in Banner's face, infecting him as well, and without the immunity of the Hulk, they had officially lost. However, we would be mistaken. As opposed to Captain America, who turned immediately after getting sneezed on, Banner was still human. Wondering just how this was possible, Bruce quickly deduced that it was never Groot who started this outbreak. It was Steve Rogers all along, the true Patient Zero. We are then brought to one small detail we all completely overlooked in the very first issue, and that was the ink pen General Ross had given Cap to sign Groot and Rocket out of prison. It was leaky, and its supposed ink had gotten all over his hand, and not long after that, became a zombie aboard the helicarrier, which then resulted in this infection, sending this world to hell. Now knowing that Ross was behind all of this, Banner had Groot quickly come with him to the lab, as they were now going to need Cap's blood if his antidote plan was still going to work. Zombie or not, Banner knew exactly what would get Steve's attention. He then activated the loudspeakers on the tower, which broadcasted a message throughout the entire city. This message being Avengers Assemble, which quickly caught the attention of the zombified Cap and the other infected supers present. The final issue opens, where we see Bruce Banner and Groot, who had finally made it to Avengers Tower, where Bruce was hard at work making the antidote for this world zombie virus. The duo had come to realize that it was not Groot who had started this pandemic after all. Rather, it was Captain America who had been infected by General Ross. With the good captain being Patient Zero, Banner purposefully led him and the fellow infected Avengers members to the tower so they could restrain him and get a sample to make the cure and finally end things. With the zombies quickly en route, Bruce told Groot that despite them having access to high-end technology, this would still take some time, and it would be up to him to keep the infected away from his lab as he worked. Not fully confident in his abilities to take on a fully zombified Avenger squad, Bruce then put Groot's worries to rest, where he reassured his friend that he would not be alone in this battle. Admitting that he secretly knew Tony Stark's room password, Banner then gained access to the Hall of Suits, where he entered a full-on Hulkbuster and summoned an entire fleet of Iron Man suits in pacify mode to keep the monsters at bay so he could work. Meeting atop Avengers Tower, the pair were soon met by the zombie Avengers, where we see that the virus had even spread to the likes of Wasp, Falcon, Black Panther, and even Scarlet Witch. Still not seeing Captain America just yet, our remaining heroes went to war with the zombies, resulting in a vicious battle aboard the rooftops. A battle made much harder by the fact that they still had to be nice and keep their friends safe and alive. It's like trying to do a no-kill run in COD Zombies. Essentially impossible. Even having to use his own body to shield the zombie Wasp from breaking her neck, Groot then came front and center with his target, where Steve Rogers would emerge, covered in even more fungal-like growths, where he pinned poor Groot to the ground and went to decapitate him. Before he could turn the Guardian of the Galaxy into a deluxe Chia Pet, Cap was then snatched by Banner in the Hulkbuster suit, where he managed to get his glove with the viral residue on it, victory seemingly being close at hand. However, as any good horror story goes, our heroes would not have it this easy, where out of nowhere, Tony's suits began rapidly exploding one by one. Wondering just what could have caused this, the men were horrified where they looked to the skies and witnessed a now fully infected Captain Marvel. Despite not having access to her full mental faculties, Carol was still as deadly as ever, where she began to blast Banner's Hulkbuster apart piece by piece, all to get to the fleshy prize inside. Quickly ejecting from the suit, Bruce and Groot made a run for it toward the lab, only for the doors to be blown open by the zombie Carol, sending both men hurtling inside. With the undead closing in, Banner sprinted toward the lab, where he quickly shut the doors and began the scanning process on the glove, saying that if they were lucky, the doors would hold, and they would have their antidote in just a few hours. Unfortunately, Lady Luck would not be on the duo's side, where they soon heard a violent scratching sound from the lab vents, where emerged an infected Rocket Raccoon, whom we have not seen since issue 1. This is absolutely horrifying. With Groot initially being delighted to see his long-lost friend, this soon turned to pure terror, where Rocket immediately pounced upon Bruce and tore into his arm, infecting him with the alien virus. Absolutely horrified, Bruce, with his last remaining humanity, told Groot that they failed, where he transformed into a fully zombified Hulk. The undead Emerald Giant would then leap at Groot, who thankfully had some fancy footwork, and dodged out of the way, sending the dude tumbling into a nearby lab tank. This would give poor Groot only a second's reprieve though, where he was soon cornered by the entire team of Avengers, who were too keen to turn him into a nice vegan dinner. Thinking all just may be lost, Groot's intelligent mind would then cause him to gaze upon Zombie Thor's hammer, which was now a bent stop sign, due to him becoming unworthy when he became infected. This made him think back to when they first discovered Odinson, who was using Mjolnir's electricity to keep the virus at bay and stop him from fully transforming. Blessed with an idea, we would see what I personally feel is probably the most ridiculous set of panels in all of Marvel Zombies, where Groot would then activate the lab sprinklers with one hand, causing it to rain inside, where he'd then let the zombies gang up on him, where he then used his other hand to stick his wooden fingers inside an electrical socket, causing immensely powerful bolts of electricity to course through him, and the other Avengers, where it somehow managed to electrocute them enough to straight up cure them of the virus. Guys, I'm not a smart dude by any means, and even I gotta admit this one is ridiculous. I'm all one to forgive dumb comic logic for a lot of things, but the math is just not math in here. If regular electricity was the ticket, why wasn't magic Asgardian electricity curing Thor earlier in the story? Secondly, people like Black Widow are still chemically human. Shouldn't she be dead from all this electricity? Next, Groot is wood. Is wood even a good conductor of electricity? Maybe it's the water from the sprinklers. What is even going on here? You know what? Never mind. What we all can agree on is that this Captain America is pretty jacked. Speaking of jacked, I kinda am too. And I also have a free 2-week superhero training program that you can get access to by filling out our consultation form in the video description. This story went off the rails, guys, and you know what? I'm going off the rails too. Might as well go off the rails together and get buff. Blacking out from the attack, Groot would later awaken, where he is then greeted by the fully cured Captain America and the rest. Apologizing for his harsh words from earlier, Captain told the Tree Man that he proved himself on this day and was worthy of the title of hero. Knowing they still had quite a bit of work to do, Steve decided that they needed to find the General Ross who started this whole thing, for he believed him to be an impersonator, and the real one would never do such a thing. Next, Banner would resume his work on the antidote for the populace, as apparently shocking them wouldn't do. Oh geez, well why not, Cap? It was good enough for you, so why shouldn't it be good enough for Zombie Grandpa down in the streets? Thinking of an easy way to mass distribute the cure, Rogers determined that their best choice for this would be Storm of the X-Men. We would see that this may not be as easy as they thought, where things are taken to the X-Mansion, where we see a horrified Professor X defending a group of mutant children within the Cerebro room. The doors would then tear open, revealing an infected Colossus, along with several other infected X-Men who happily made their way to their next meal.